unresolved issues, they dissolve. They take another form. You have no way of knowing that that issue still exists. And another way of putting it, that some unresolved issues, we have a conflict, we have a big blowout, that big blowout occurs, and then we act as if everything has went away, it's resolved, it's made it to the point, and now we begin to behave as if there's no other issue present. So we've now dissolved the issue. Some of us have so many unresolved issues, it's like a whole bookshelf of unresolved issues, and they stay there because they've dissolved, and they only show up when another argument occurs. Welcome to the Dr. G.L. White Show, where we explore the role of Black fathers in strengthening families and building strong communities. My name is Dr. Gary L. White, and today we're going to talk about the issue of resolving versus dissolving issues. That's right, you've heard me. There's a difference between resolving an issue with your partner versus dissolving an issue. So right off the bat, what does that mean, to resolve versus to dissolve? Well, if you think about, let's say, a cup of coffee with cubes of sugar, right? So what does resolving versus dissolving looks like? So to resolve an issue, that means it's settled. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But let's talk about how dissolving is. I'd like to use the analogy of a cube of sugar in a cup of hot black coffee. If I take cubes of sugar without you knowing and I drop those cubes of sugar in the hot coffee, you have no way of knowing how many cubes of sugar that are in that coffee. You can't see the cubes because they've dissolved, right? And so that means that the sugar has taken another form, but it's just as sweet. Now, imagine if I put 10 cubes of sugar in that hot coffee. Just by looking at it on the face value, you still have no way of knowing how much sugar is in there. I could put 20 cubes of sugar in there. As long as the coffee's hot, you have no way of knowing how much sugar is in that cup, except the moment you taste it. Or another way of putting it, except the moment you experience it. Then you're very clear on how much or how little sugar is in that coffee. Well, relationships are exactly the same way. Unresolved issues, they dissolve. They take another form. You have no way of knowing that that issue still exists. And another way of putting it, that some unresolved issues, we have a conflict, we have a big blowout, that big blowout occurs, and then we act as if everything has went away, it's resolved, it's made it to the point, and now we begin to behave as if there's no other issue present. So we've now dissolved the issue. Some of us have so many unresolved issues, it's like a whole bookshelf of unresolved issues, and they stay there because they've dissolved, and they only show up when another argument occurs. Now, how does that happen? It looks like this. You're in an argument. You all get into an argument. It's a big issue. And you thought that the previous issue that resolved went away, but in truth, it didn't. That unresolved issue, or that issue that has dissolved, it'll show up in an example. It looks like this. You're arguing and you say, yeah, that's just like the last time when you said this. And now all of a sudden, you've reintroduced the unresolved issue. Or there's another one in where you are arguing, you say, you know what, I'm gonna let it go. And then you, later on, the argument or the issue comes, you go, well, last time I let that go. Well, these are dissolved issues. So I need you all to write this down, that the three biggest lies that we tell ourselves, listen very carefully. The three biggest lies that we tell ourselves is that I'm gonna let it ride, I'm gonna let it slide, and I'm gonna let it go. Let me say that again. I'm gonna let it ride, I'm gonna let it slide, I'm gonna let it go, right? And so, but the truth of the matter is, a lot of us, we don't let it ride, we don't let it slide, and we don't let it go. What we do is we store it. Again, that's another issue on the emotional bookshelf. And then it shows up later on. And sometimes that unresolved issue on that bookshelf is in the form of a false apology, right? You know, I forgive you, but you don't. You've let it ride, you've not let it slide, and you've not let it go. And so we want to focus today on really how do you resolve an issue? Well, we know that again, with these unresolved issues that we have dissolved, they show up in conflict, they show up in emotional management, they show up in closeness, they show up in all these areas. But when we start focusing on resolving it, well, this is where it becomes most important. Number one, we want to learn how to resolve by communicating effectively. And that means that where there's communication, I'm going to let you know, well, let me make sure I got it right, right? There's the act of listening, everything that's kind of before us, but you have to pay attention to the body language. Understand this, our nonverbal communication is just as powerful and just as effective as our verbal communication. And there can be a difference, right? So here's what it looks like when what we say and how we demonstrate it doesn't match. It's when you go, you know what? Okay, I'm fine with it. I'm good. I'm good. You straight? Nah, I'm straight. Yeah, I'm good. Well, you're not. And sometimes people can see it. So what I'm saying is that this is a form of emotional intelligence when we talk about how to effectively resolve an issue. And what I mean by emotional intelligence, you are aware of your own emotional state and you are aware of the emotional state of the person you're dealing with. Right? So step number one in resolving the issue is to pay attention to the body language, right? Communicate effectively. Accept that part of the disagreement that you own. And you know, it can be very difficult sometimes. You'll hear me say this throughout every podcast, the management of our emotions. It becomes problematic because it will get in the way. Dissolving issues, that's the boat that those unresolved issues sail out on. So I want you to focus on the communication and the body language. Two, in resolving issues, I want you to own the part that you take in whatever the disagreement is. Now listen, I don't care if it's 1%. Own your 1%. Right? And I'm going to tell you, it makes a big difference and it prevents arguments from escalating. So to resolve an issue is that we're going to focus on what the issue is and stay on point with the issue. Being mindful not to allow past issues or past unresolved issues to show up. Also, in resolving a conflict or difference of opinion is to stay on task. It is so tempting to bring up past issues, unresolved conflicts into the scenario. So to resolve an issue, I'm telling you, is to focus and be mindful on what the person is saying. Find the part that you agree on. You have to oftentimes agree on some part of that. Also, in resolving issues, is recognizing that there's a difference between an opinion and a fact. Let me say that again. There's a difference between an opinion and a fact. And I'm going to tell you that anyone who has an opinion, here's what I'm telling you, is that their opinion is always right. And as a matter of fact, your opinion is always right. Why? Because it's your opinion. And opinions are not facts because facts are something that can be independently determined, right? Whether or not you were in attendance at a meeting, right? That's a fact. How do we verify it? Here's the enrollment. But whether or not today is a beautiful day, whether or not it's the best day of your life, that's an opinion. And so part of resolving issues is recognizing that when you're in a conflict or have a difference of opinion, being able to immediately differentiate between a fact and an opinion. Now, if it's a fact, then what you do is you present the facts or the objective evidence that that is in fact what it is, and allow the facts to speak for themselves. But remember, facts alone does not resolve conflicts because the emotions that's tied up with it is equally important. So what am I saying here? I'm saying even with resolving issues and presenting facts, according to emotional intelligence, I have to be in tune on how I share that with you. Right? Some people, you can talk with them right up, come and be as raw and straightforward, but others, you have to take a different approach in terms of how you communicate with them, because to resolve an issue is not just you got it off your chest. To resolve an issue is that you and that other person, you all have walked away with a good understanding of what you have said and what's been communicated. And so we move towards resolving the issues, we move toward having the understanding, and we monitor to see if that issue shows up again. And if it does, then this is where you start focusing on having new communication with your partner. If an unresolved issue comes up, immediately in a disagreement, say, I thought the issue was resolved. And there are some occasions where you have to go back and revisit. But that's because, as I said before, they failed to didn't let it ride, they didn't let it slide, and they didn't let it go. They stored it. And so it's important. Finally, in the art of resolving an issue is to check in. How are we doing? A lot of times people have big arguments and they'll blow up and they'll disappear and they'll come back once the emotions and the energy and everything is subsided, and then people come back, and then the worst thing that can happen, and I need you to listen to me very clearly, the worst thing you can do after a conflict is to come back and pretend like it never happened. So what I'm saying is that once the emotions have subsided, the way to effectively resolve an issue is that when we come back together, then we talk about it without what I call having an emotional reenactment. Let me say that again. I'm going to go back and revisit an issue with you, but in doing so, now my energy and my emotions from when we had the discussion all comes back. Now we might have to take a time out, right? And whoever calls that time out, then you have to call the back time in. But sometimes if emotions get in front of the communication and you recognize that, then that's when you need to kind of dial it back. But what's critical in here is that you allow those emotions and those things to begin to subside. And when you come back and you start debriefing, let's look at what happened. Let's understand how it went. And the debriefing sometimes can be the most powerful part of making up. And so what I'm going to invite you, each of you, to do as you learn to communicate with each other, as you focus on resolving more issues, I'm going to tell you to never abandon the importance of resolving, no matter how emotional it is, no matter how much fear you might have in terms of coming back to that issue. But I'm telling you, you need to resolve it. Because the quickest way to put anything up on your shelf is when the issue happens, you come back and everybody pretends like it didn't happen. And now I know all the love songs and all the music. You know, one of my favorite songs are the OJs. And he said, and we cried together, and then we made love through. I get it. But you still have to come back and revisit it. So effective resolving of issues are tied into the debriefing, where we can come back when all the emotions are out of the way. Also, in closing that gap, I'm saying that sometimes you need to have conversations about communicating with each other, not following an incident, not just following a disagreement, but just a self-check or a check-in. Say, babe, I want to talk about making our communication better. And so now you could talk about how to communicate effectively and it's not connected to an issue. When you can do that, and you can kind of learn to communicate with one another, and you can begin to debrief on just about everything you do, you're going to find yourself debriefing on this show right here. You're going to find yourself debriefing on what I've said. And in that debriefing, you're going to look back and say, Dr. White, I'll toast to that.